Hey, what's up, everybody? Chicago Gooner here, bringing you another Arsenal talk. In this Arsenal talk, I'm going to cover something a little bit different, something that's a little bit in the news over the last few days. Is the fact that all the English teams are completely out of European football right now. It's been the craze, it's been the talk amongst fans and all over the world, whether it's on especially like talk radio, Sirius XM. They have Sirius XM FC, which is just 24 hours a day. Football talk. They have like Talk Sport on there. Then they have their other, they have their own programming as well. Uh, but over the last couple of days, it's been like the talk of all English teams are out of European football, which means Champions League and Europa League. Um, and there's been some good arguments been made about this and why English teams seem to fail when it comes to European football these days. I mean, English teams pretty much ruled, other than maybe like a Real Madrid, they pretty much ruled European football for a few decades. You can go back and look of how many times that Italian teams and English teams seem like they kind of basically ruled European football for a while. And of course, like I said, it's the craze that's everybody's talking about. Everybody's has their own opinions, and people are saying that the EPL is not the best league in the world, and they have all this money and they're not spending it wisely, and they flake out when it comes to European football, when it comes to the knockout stages. I'm not going to sit here and give an excuse of why Arsenal got knocked out, because they did it to themselves. That first leg of the Monaco game, it was just it was a dagger in the heart for any Arsenal fan. I mean, no one can make an excuse for that match, and make an excuse of why we're knocked out. We're knocked out because of our own doing, our own. We're just too naive going into that first leg, rather than playing like we did in the second leg for both legs. I think these guys are really starting to feel that kind of pressure. They're feeling that. We have to go out every single game and give it 100%, and this is what I'm going to kind of cover in this Arsenal talk of how difficult it is for English teams to play, not only in Europe, European football, but also domestic football. And I think I think it gets pushed aside way too easily, rather than it's easy to say, well, Real Madrid, Barcelona go through every time. PSG is going through every time. Bayern Munich is going through every time. Why can't like an EPL team, other than maybe in the 2000s of when we were going through constantly through like the quarterfinals, and Manchester United was going through the quarterfinals, and Chelsea won it a few years ago. Uh, um, I mean, it's kind of, to me, it's piss poor arguments, um, of how some uh, you know radio personalities and pundits are just kind of pushing it to the side and not really looking at it intelligently, I guess you can say. It's kind of like I said, it's easy to name any of those other teams and say, well, they go through every single time. Why can't an EPL team do that? Why can't two EPL teams get into the quarterfinals? At least one gets into the semifinals. Why shouldn't that happen every single year? It's difficult. When you look at the EPL, you can't compare it to any other league in the world because of the amount of money it generates on a yearly basis. I mean, it keeps on going up and up and up. I mean, you've seen the new TV deal that's going to be in effect in, I believe, not next season, but the season after that. And how much money it's going to generate for the EPL, its teams. Of course, it depends on where you finish in the table as well, of how much money you do get from the TV contracts. But for the most part, it's even money for the most part. From if you finish first, if you finish in the top four, top five, I think you get a little bit more money. But everybody gets a single denomination of money, no matter what, no matter where they finish in the league. And no other league really has that. I think the Bundesliga is trying to go that route, but uh, they're starting to get TV contracts out the ass as well. Next year, they're at least in the United States, Fox is going to be covering their entire season, which I'm looking forward to get a little bit more, different, look. I like the Bundesliga. I think it's the closest league you can come to the EPL as far as being, end to end, just exciting football to watch. With La Liga, I mean, like I said, I'm trying to compare money with La Liga. You can look at their TV contracts, and I mean, half of the league is almost bankrupt, and they're in the top flight, and they're almost bankrupt. Their TV deal is a joke. I think Barcelona and Real Madrid get something about 40% of the contract, of the TV contracts that they get. I think Atletico Madrid gets about 10%, and the rest of the league gets either, I think it's less than 1%, which is ridiculous. I mean, if La Liga wanted to be the best league in the world, they could easily be the best league in the world if they did it like the EPL, where they shared the money, but they just don't. Barcelona, Real Madrid, they don't want to share the money. They want to keep on generating as much money as they can possibly muster up. Of course, people, you can't be surprised by when they're going out and spending 70 million pounds on a player, 80 million pounds, 90 million pounds on a single player, to where only maybe two or three, maybe four teams in the EPL can actually do that, even though we get a huge contract deal. Half of that is because I think we spend our money a little bit more wisely. When you take into account that we do share money, that everybody gets a single denomination of money, no matter where you finish in the league. I mean, watching the final playoff game in the championship last season, it was between Derby and QPR. The commentators made it a point of emphasis to say that getting into the EPL, getting into the Premier League, is worth over 100 million pounds. That's a shitload of money. If you consider, TV contracts, merchandise, ticket sales, cup sales, Capital One Cup, FA Cup, 100 million pounds. I mean, think about that. I mean, how many other teams coming up into the top flight of any other league in the world? Can they guarantee that? Probably not. It probably doesn't even come close to it. So when you're trying to compare the money between the EPL and La Liga, Bundesliga, Liga, and Serie A, it's night and day. When you consider that a team can really go out there, even the lowest team in the Premiership can go out there and spend 20, 30, maybe even 35 million pounds in the transfer window to get in new players, to get in more experienced players, because sometimes when you try to bring up championship players, I mean, you're kind of seeing that with Leicester. They try to bring up the same exact team that they did from last year. They made a couple signings, but nothing that was, really kind of like marquee, depending on, given the fact that they are a lower league team. And it just doesn't work. You have to spend that money, and EPL teams do that. At least the majority of them, especially the ones who want to stay up in the league. So when you consider that English Premier League teams spend that money, they spend the 20, the 30, maybe even 35 million pounds in a transfer window, and then you're trying to compare it to a lower league, lower half team in La Liga who really can't spend any money. Most of the time they have to sell off their players just to, it was kind of like what Arsenal had to do. They had to sell off a player or two just to generate some type of money so they can go out and maybe get two or three extra players. Because they don't have the money, they don't have the ticket sales to rise their ticket sales up, so they can generate even more money. They just don't have the means to do that. Because top to bottom, I mean, I think top to bottom, the EPL is the best league in the world. It's the toughest league in the world. It's the most exciting league in the world. It's the richest league in the world. And that's the argument I make. Probably going back a year or two, I thought, La Liga is the best league in the world, given the fact that they're so top heavy. But really looking at it and really looking at like the numbers and the amount of money that even say a Sutherland or even maybe not Burnley, because they kind of did the same route as Leicester City, to where they didn't really spend that much money. QPR spent money in this past transfer window. Crystal Palace, I mean, name any, like kind of like even the bottom half teams, they went out and spent money. To where you're looking at teams like in the Bundesliga, Liga, La Liga, Serie A, they didn't really spend money. I mean, fucking Parma had to declare bankruptcy today. And I mean that, unless someone comes swoops in and buys that team, it's pretty much done. It's going to be a team that's going to be no more, because they had to declare bankruptcy for the most part. And when you look at that, when you look at teams that can go out there and spend 25, 30 million pounds in the summer transfer window, teams are going to be tougher. I mean, you go into, you watch La Liga, you watch PSG play, one of the bottom half teams, one of the teams in the range of, say, like 14 to 20. I mean, they can sleepwalk those games. In the BPL, you can't do that. Look what happened to Man City against Burnley. Burnley won 1-0. Yeah, they had to play a defensive game. They had to play well organized. They did their own attacking as well. But again, you're talking about a bottom half team beating a second place that's currently second place, and who is the defending BPL champions of last year. You don't see that a ton in La Liga. You don't see that a ton in Bundesliga. You don't see that a ton in name any other leagues. You just don't see that. But in the BPL, you do see that. Why? Because the BPL teams spend money. Yeah, some of them hoard money, but again, they're out there spending the money too. And given that single fact alone, of course our league is going to be 10 times harder than any other league. I mean, it's just a single fact. And given the fact of our schedule, we do not have a winter break. That argument has been made time and time again, that we should take a winter break, like every other league does. But that Christmas period generates so much money for the BPL and so much notoriety, because all the other leagues, they just stop. There's nothing being played. Some of the top teams, they play like friendlies and stuff like that, but they're not playing like they do in the BPL. What is it, like a 3 or 4 game stretch in about 10 days that we play. And what happens is, I mean, you can look at the TV ratings during those 10 days, and it's just it's huge. I mean, the TV ratings and the money that it generates is huge. So there's no fucking way that the FA and the BPL is going to agree to take a winter break. But again, you give our schedule. I mean, even in the past couple weeks, we had to play a game against QPR midweek. Why? Because it generates money. But again, it makes our season that much more difficult. You give the fact also too that we play on 4 fronts. We have 4 tournaments that most teams play in. You give the fact that you have the top 4 who plays in Champions League. You have the 5th and 6th place playing in Europa. A team like Liverpool, who got knocked out of the group stage, went directly to Europa after they got knocked out of the group stage of the Champions League. And I believe there's one more spot that they play in a playoff for Europa as well. So you're talking about somewhere around 7 teams or so from the EPL playing European football, or the possibility of it, I should say. So you have at least 7 of the 20 teams playing in another front. And this is basically based on the top 4. I'm not gonna keep on trying to make excuses for the Europa people, because I really don't give a shit about that tournament. But at the same time, you have to make it an argument to make this argument, I guess. And of course, you have the FA Cup, the oldest running trophy in the world, longest running tournament in the world. Then you have the Capital One Cup, which is played early on in the season. It starts up early in the BPL season. So you have that, and that doesn't even end until what it just ended a few weeks ago. Uh, right on March 1st, I believe, was the final. So you're looking at how deep that goes into the BPL season, and then of course you have the BPL season on top of that. So that's four fronts that some of those teams, like Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City, whoever the fourth, Liverpool, Manchester United, you throw Tottenham into that mix because they're always in Europa. You throw Everton now. That's Everton's a classic case of that. They just got too tired. And you look where they are in the league right now. I mean, they're not doing well because they had to switch off and try to make a run in Europa as well, because there's a little bit more. Uh, uh, there's a little bit more wanting to win Europa now, just because of the fact it gives you a Champions League spot now. It gives you a playoff spot at least, that you can play in a playoff and try to earn your way into the group stages of the Champions League. But you give that fact, you give the fact that even our bottom half teams are spending money. We're playing on four fronts. The schedule is brutal. I mean, there is really no break for any of the top teams in the EPL, but Bundesliga has breaks. La Liga has a break. Liga, Serie A, they all have breaks. They have time to rest players. They have time to get players back from injury. They have an extra 2 weeks of doing absolutely nothing, if they choose to. And sometimes you could see that, you look at Real Madrid's form right now currently. It's pretty dog shit after their winter break. But does that play into our hands? It obviously doesn't, because sometimes you just see, once the Champions League starts getting back up, you kind of start seeing some tired legs out there. You start to see them, some players just wear down because of how brutal our schedule is, of how tough our schedule is. And sometimes, like I said, it's being naive. It's being naive, knowing the fact that we do have like the toughest schedule, the toughest league to play in, top to bottom, and you give those facts, and sometimes you play naive, saying, well, we played against this team, and Barcelona and Real Madrid, they don't have to play against these type of teams week in and week out. They don't have that huge physicality that's in the EPL, that's noted for the EPL. That's very physical. It's very fast. It's end to end. Regardless if a team's parking a bus or not, they're always trying to go down the counter, and when they do go on the counter, it's fast. And given the fact, look at what happens to new players that come into the EPL. It takes some players almost a full year to adapt to the style and to the gameplay, and how physical it can be, and how mentally fatigued you can become during a season. So, you take into account of you take all those arguments into account, and I think a lot of the criticism that the EPL teams get is unjust. It gets brushed aside for whatever reason. Of course, one of the arguments is well, that's what they choose to do. They choose not to have a winter break. They choose not to do this. They choose not to do that. And I mean, I think it's a piss poor argument. I think it's one of those, like I just said, it's so easy for pundits or commentators or radio personalities to just brush it aside. I mean, that's what they basically do. Rather than looking at the facts, looking at the money, looking at the schedule, looking at what even bottom half teams look like compared to La Liga teams or Bundesliga teams or Liga or Serie A, the top leagues in the world, instead of comparing our bottom half teams to theirs and seeing how much more difficult it really is, they just brush it aside. It's easy for someone to say, no, 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 because Barcelona and Real Madrid are two of the wealthiest clubs in the world, every club should be like that. Well, we don't play against cupcakes. I mean, you can make a case that maybe Leicester City or even Burnley or maybe QPR, you look at the drop zone right now, that's what we consider cupcakes. But any of those teams could probably finish and stay in their top flight for a number of years. Um, with some of the the talent they have, the way they play, of how tough it is week in and week out. Because you have to play your A game every time you play in the EPL. Every single team that you come up against. I mean, you just don't see it in La Liga. Of course, Barcelona, Real Madrid, two of the best teams in the world. You can't argue that. How many times have you seen them lose against really bottom half teams, teams in the drop zone? Same with Bayern Munich. How many times? Their league is almost over by March. Sometimes even by February. Sometimes. I mean, doesn't that show it's a weak league? That it's already over by that time? It shows of how their bottom half teams are just non-existent. They don't put up the fight that our teams could, and so I think it's unjust of how we can just be displaced like this. I'm not one of those like rah rah. I'm gonna root for EPL teams in European competition because I just don't do that. But I'm rah rah when it comes to when you look at the league top to bottom, the money it generates, how tough it is, our schedule, the players that are within the EPL. I mean, like I said, I just think it's unjust. And tell me what you guys think. Is it unjust? Is it just a brush to the side? Is it too much of Barcelona, Real Madrid fanboys of it's so easy to just say anoint them the best teams in the world and how dominant they can be in European football when they play cupcakes a lot of times. Usually their top three or their top four is already in stone, set in stone for the most part, before the league is even played. I mean, for the most part, last year was kind of like a paradox to where Atletico Madrid basically came out of nowhere and won the league. I think the last time they won the league was in the 90s. It was always flip-flop between Barcelona and Real Madrid. When a La Liga season starts, you can say, well, Barcelona or Real Madrid's going to win the league. If each one of them and one of them's going to finish second. I mean, how boring is that? I mean, what does that say about a league? To be honest with you, starting this season in the BPL, you could have named Arsenal if they stayed healthy to win, Man City to repeat, and Chelsea. Those are the top three going into the season. You couldn't say Liverpool because they lost Suarez. Manchester United, they spent a shitload of money, but they were still just going to fight for a top four spot, not actually win the league. But again, you're talking about at least three teams that no one could say they're going to win the league, or they're going to win the league, or they're definitely going to win the league. It's not like La Liga. If you look at the point standings right now, between second and fifth is a matter of, I believe, 4 points. It's just the toughest league in the world, top to bottom, every single week. You see it with Arsenal. Sometimes they come out and they play like dog shit. Sometimes it's just the opposition playing better. Sometimes it's just a schedule that just beats us up. Sometimes we just don't have the proper amount of squad depth. That's what we were struggling for, up until this year when we have proper squad depth for once. Because we just didn't have the money to spend. But leave your comments down below and let me know what you think. Is this just a paradox year that it was a perfect storm for everybody else, and the EPL just didn't perform at their best? Leave your comments down below what you think. Is the EPL the best league in the world? I think it is, top to bottom. Maybe we're not as top heavy like a La Liga, Liga, Bundesliga, where Bayern Munich just rules that fucking league. So tell me what you guys think, and your opinions and any type of facts that you can come up with, and does money come into it? Does does lower league or lower half teams spending money make a difference? All that kind of stuff. But yeah, that'll be it. Later.